Hello, my name is Jen Ballou, and I am a doula located in Laguna Beach, California. I am the owner operator of JuJu'be Doula. If you want to check out my website, feel free to. It's www.jujubedoula.com. That's JuJubeDoula.com. And so I'm starting this channel. I have a couple of videos on here, but I really wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to take the channel. I was still establishing, myself as a doula and as a holistic doula. I practice holistically, and I'm starting to get where I want to take this. Right, starting to really kind of see that vision and where I want to take this channel. So we'll start there. I am a energy healer. I practice vibrational energetic facilitation, and that goes into my doula work, that goes into my birth work, that goes into my conception, preconception, conscious conception, fertility, as well as my postpartum work as well. And that includes a shamanic practice, meaning I like to tell stories. I like to connect to the story and bring in all of the elements, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in order to create a sacred space that allows me to teach from, that allows me to create this energy field, create this template, you could say, of an experience. And this is healing, right? This is meant to allow one to incorporate the entirety of a story, right? Like so often in life, we hide the bad stuff, right? We mask it, we dance around it. We don't embrace it, right? We don't embrace the shadow. We don't embrace the darkness. And life is about both sides, life and death. And each part is very important in our journeys, and very important to allow yourself to be a healthy individual, to allow yourself to be a whole individual. And this obviously goes into my work through sacred sexuality. So through the journey through sacred sexuality, conception, pregnancy, birth, and beyond. In order to create healthy individuals, healthy partnerships, healthy families, healthy communities, whole communities. Our idea of health is very distorted, so don't get me started on that. But to really, really create this, this better world, it starts now, right? It starts now. So often people are in a rush to get pregnant, right? They talk about it with their significant other, or whoever it may be. It could be just a decision that they make on their own, and they rush the process rather than actually taking the time to sit back, to reflect, to really dig down deep into oneself, to align oneself to something more, to something better, to not carrying on the old dysfunctions that we may have with our families, with previous relationships and different things like that. And I know this through my own experience, and that is how I came into this work. So I wanted to share my own experience so you can kind of have an idea of where I come from and the work I do, and how I can assist you on your journey, how I can assist the whole. And then you understand my journey. And in subsequent videos, my plan right now is to share others' birth stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So we are able to all embrace this part of our life, this journey wholeheartedly, and to create a new way forward, because the truth is that we need to make changes. We do. We have a long way to go. We definitely have a long way to go to embrace life in a much more fundamental way, to appreciate life, to honor life, and that is to honor also choice, right? Choice as well. Choice comes into this, allowing everyone to have their own choice, free will, and everything like that, encompassed into the whole. So my experience. So I have a 7-year-old son, and he is my reason for being here. Right? He is my reason for being here. And I can say that with it knowing how difficult it's been to get here. But I would not be here if it wasn't for him. I was on a very different path before he made himself known to me that he wanted to come in, and through my choice to embrace that. So I was married back in 2010 to my ex-husband, first marriage, only marriage thus far, and it was not a good marriage. It was not a good marriage. It was highly dysfunctional, abusive, just not something that I wanted to raise children in. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I ignored all the warning signs and kept trying to fix it, and had a whole bunch of different things going on that I had to take a good hard look at. We were not trying to get pregnant. It just happened, although we weren't also completely not trying. But my experience ended up being traumatic, you could say. My first go around, right? My first go around with bringing life into this world through conception, through pregnancy, through birth, and beyond. The night before I found out I was pregnant, I knew my marriage was over, and had come to terms with that, you could say, on some level. And the next day, I knew I had to go out and get a pregnancy test because my period was late. And sure enough, it was positive. When I told my ex-husband that I was pregnant, first thing out of his mouth was, well, what do you want to do about it? Now, he knew my own personal choices, and he knew that I wanted to have children, and he knew that I would always make that choice. That's just my own personal choice, right? And it was not the most loving of expressions in that moment, although I was probably crying at that time, or at least not happy. So it was not the greatest conception experience. Needless to say, I tried to make it work, right? Tried to fix things, and had these grandiose ideas of a Bradley birth, which is a partner-styled birth. And, I really, I dug into this process, right? I was pregnant. I embraced it. I embraced the journey. I embraced it wholeheartedly. I knew I was meant to walk that path. I knew it as a mother. And whatever came, came, but I embraced it. And so, the plan was, my choice was to have a Bradley birth. I thought in my mind somehow I could, create this ideal birthing experience where my ex-husband and I would, have this intimate bond, and everything would be beautiful. And it was a fantasy. It was not based in reality. And and I was not aware of that, of course. I just kept trying, and I wasn't coming to terms with things, right? I wasn't coming to terms with the actual reality of where my relationship was at, where my marriage was at, where he was at. And yet I kept, going forward with that. Chose wrong. I made like every mistake in the book, and I still thought, I can do this, right? I can do this. I can do this on my own, right? Needless to say, my pregnancy was not a good pregnancy. I was miserable the entire time. I was very much into it, though, right? Studying every little sensation that I was having in my body. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know the best way to do things, the natural way. I didn't want to do pain medication, and I was like, oh, I got this. I'm a strong woman. I can do this. Now realizing that, I really needed that support, and I didn't have that support. And I'm a Taurus, so I'm a little bit stubborn, and, I just kept trekking on. I ended up gaining about 100 pounds. Again, just emotional eating, not happy. And not saying there was anything wrong with it. I mean, I was hungry. I was hungry. And I ate. And I ate. And I was unhappy. And I ate. But not the most healthy of pregnancies. And there were so many factors that went into it. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just the entirety of what I was experiencing, based on the relationship I was in, based on, I was working full time. I was working like 50 hours a week. I had this side hustle business that I was doing. It was a lot. And needless to say, about 3 weeks before my due date, I started to experience daily contractions. Now, they weren't Braxton Hicks. They were more than Braxton Hicks, and yet I couldn't find much information out there on it. Turns out it was prodromal labor, which women can often experience weeks, before they give birth, and it's like early labor. But they were painful, and to have to go through that, on my own, not there wasn't much information out there on it. It was very difficult to find. I've since found a lot now, but nobody understood. Nobody understood what I was going through. I didn't have a doula. I couldn't afford a doula, right? I couldn't afford a doula, right? I've since found out, if I would have had a doula, things would have been completely different. But, I embraced the journey, right? So I was going through that. Ex-husband wasn't there with me, right? He wasn't present with me. He didn't understand. Of course, doctor didn't understand. OBGYN didn't understand. Of course not. I got into spinning babies. I knew he was in the wrong position. I knew all these things about my body, right? But I didn't have that support. There was nothing out there. I knew I had belly mapped. I knew exactly his position. And a lot of this I had learned from my Bradley class, and I had an amazing instructor. And if it wasn't for her, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have lost my mind. So I kept trying to turn that baby, kept trying to turn my son, knowing he was not in a good position. And I did end up going into spontaneous labor I was at 40 weeks, 5 days. Big baby, of course. They were telling me, they might have to induce. all the things that, doctors will tell you. But I held firm. I did stay strong, and I allowed myself to go into natural, spontaneous labor. Once labor began, I was happy because it was finally going somewhere, right? 3.5 weeks of prodromal labor sucked. But I was anxious. And I wasn't necessarily resting in early labor the way that I should have. I did not have any support. My ex-husband was literally just refused to be with me. Refused. Whether it was out of fear, I don't know, but he couldn't be there. Like, I kept trying to engage him and he refused. And I was all on my own, completely on my own, not knowing what to do, not having a guide. And it was highly traumatic. Especially when things started to really pick up. I was on my own. I remember sitting there timing my own contractions, trying to figure out all on my own when we were going to head to the hospital, and fearing that my ex-husband was not going to be there to take me. And because of that, I wanted to go somewhere, right? Somewhere where I wasn't alone. And so went to the hospital early, was only 1 centimeter dilated, had a doctor who was a complete dickhead, complete narcissist, no compassion whatsoever from what I was experiencing, no ability to notice that there was abuse occurring between my ex-husband and I. My ex-husband taking his side, you could say, in shaming me for coming to the hospital too early, for only being 1 centimeter dilated. And I felt like a failure, and sent me home, right? Sent us home, back to being on my own, birthing on my own, not knowing what to do. And it was very, very scary. Very scary. And so eventually, when things started to pick up again, I made the choice to go to the hospital. Of course, I was shamed again by my ex-husband. Are we supposed to stay home? What's, everything. But he wasn't present with me. He wasn't present. It was like World War III, like everything that I had planned for, like falling to shit. So needless to say, once we got back to the hospital, I was still only at 1 centimeter, and I wanted to stay. And so I essentially committed myself to the hospital protocol of intervention after intervention after intervention. I had surrendered. I couldn't fight it anymore. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't be on my own. And so I just allowed, right? Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And I ended up with a C-section, needless to say. Had my, artificial rupture of membranes, and I knew my son was not in that optimal position. I knew I needed to move him, right? That he needed to move. I knew all this stuff. And it's like, it didn't matter how much I knew. I didn't have the support, right? It didn't matter how much I knew, because I knew everything that was going on in my body. And I knew what to do, but I didn't have any support. It was just me, and I couldn't do everything on myself, And so, luckily, the woman doctor who was the doctor who allowed me to make a choice for my own body when my son was born, who very much picked up on the things that was going on in my relationship, although I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't understand it because I just wasn't there yet. She gave me my dignity back. And that in and of itself was a huge blessing. She allowed me to choose the time of birth. It could have been the day my son was born, and it could have been the next day. And she allowed me to make that choice. She allowed me to have my process. She gave me my power back. And as traumatic as it was, I was so grateful for that. I was so grateful for that. I had a great C-section. I mean, a great recovery. Like everything went really good. She was a very, very good doctor. And I was very blessed to have that. A healthy son, big boy, almost 10 pounds, 9 pounds, 10 ounces. And, you know, I got my healthy boy. That wasn't the end of my trauma. I did, the day that we brought my son home, my ex-husband became even more abusive, losing control, whatever it may be. He didn't like the fact that I was in my power, right, as a mother. He couldn't handle it. You know, like I knew what to do, and somehow he didn't like the fact that I was in my power. And so, needless to say, it was a difficult homecoming and a difficult recovery period. And it took me years to come to terms with that experience. I had to leave my marriage behind in order to be able to have a safe space to fully process through it. But the importance of processing through trauma, the importance of processing through birth trauma, family trauma, relationship trauma, whatever it may be, is so important, because you cannot be a healthy individual without having processed through that, without coming to spaces of understanding, without grieving, without truly living. You know, being alive means processing through the bad stuff. It means coming to terms with the bad stuff, the ugly stuff, the stuff we don't want to face. And that's not just within our interpersonal relationships. That is within ourselves and our shadow side, the things that we don't like to look at about ourselves. And that also is in society in general. And when we have these unprocessed traumas, it inhibits our life. It keeps us from being able to have a healthy conception. It keeps us from being able to have a healthy pregnancy. And that doesn't mean that, you know, if you can't conceive, you're in an unhealthy relationship. It may mean that there are things from your childhood that you haven't processed through. Something from a previous relationship. Maybe there are issues in your relationship that are they just need to be brought forth. They need to be worked through as a partnership, right? They need to be come to terms with. And these are the things that when we bury them and we do not bring them out and we do not release them and we do not gain the wisdom and the understanding from these traumas, from these experiences, we are not able to move forward in healthy ways. And we will experience things like infertility, like a traumatic birth experience, like a miscarriage, like developmental issues in childhood, dysfunctional families. So it's really, really getting down to, before you choose to bring life into this world, digging in deep and making the choice for yourself, making the choice for your partner, making the choice for your family to change things, to have that impact, because your child will be healthier if you make those choices before conception. And these are things like, nutrition. These are, they're very simple things, and yet they are very difficult for us to do in order to have a conscious conception. And some of the work I do is to assist individuals in processing through these traumas in very easy ways, right? This isn't 20 years of therapy. And that's often why a lot of people won't do the work before. And they end up having to go perhaps down a path like IVF. And I'm not judging that path. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you take a step back and you do the work before going down that, number one, it's going to be an easier path for you. You're more likely to conceive that way if that is your path. Number two, you can conceive naturally. I can't tell you how many clients I've had as a doula who were given, they were told they have polycystic. Most of my clients, they were told things. They were told they have PCOS. They were told they have endometriosis. Like all these things that make it difficult to get pregnant. They had babies, happy, healthy babies. I had one client who was told that she would have to get IVF and made some changes in her life and got pregnant naturally. There are so many success stories of making those changes prior that will allow you to have that experience you truly desire, that natural experience, not being pumped up with a bunch of, hormones in order to conceive, but conceiving naturally. If that's your choice, there are ways for that. And processing through your traumas is one of those ways. And that is what I am able to offer in addition to, I'm a doula, but something that I'm very, very passionate about is those who have been told something that just isn't true. You won't be able to have a child naturally. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. And there are other ways. They don't know you. Those doctors likely don't know you. They don't know what you've gone through. And so taking a step back and going backward, right? And looking at your life, looking at where you've experienced trauma, looking at your entire life as a whole thing, and beginning to make adjustments based on that, moving into new directions, trying new things, making changes that will allow you to create that conception, create that birth that you desire first, or the subsequent pregnancies, right? Or allow you to just move forward. Maybe you had a traumatic birth experience and you can't move forward. You feel like you're not that optimal, mother, father, whatever it may be. You're not that optimal parent. And so through these sessions that I offer, I call them sacred light guides, we're able to work through much of your trauma and then bring in a new template, bring in new energy, bring in new structure, new framework for you to connect to in order to not only process through that trauma and release out, right, any emotions that are stagnant, anything that you've buried really deep, but also have something to connect to in order to move forward, right, into new directions. So this is like years worth of therapy in a very small package. It involves hypnosis induction. I have created this modality with a small group of other healers, and we've incorporated multiple aspects, each individually, each having our own little, thing going on, however we practice it. But it includes, hypnosis induction, it includes energy healing, it includes you could say, in a way, neuro-linguistic programming, but it's more of your own original design coming in, right? So your own natural way of being, um, you being able to bring that in, to release out everything that's come before, and for you to be that which you desire, for you to embody your true self, which will allow you to then conceive naturally, to move forward into a healthy birth, to move forward past a traumatic birth, and all those things that we want, right? All those things that we want. So I wanted to share my own experience with you, and I have been a recipient of the Sacred Light Guide, and I cannot tell you how a recipient and a creator, and I cannot tell you how instrumental it has been in my healing process, in my ability to, embody my mission, come into my power, and be who I've always been on a very deep level, and yet not had the ability to personify or to be, right? To be, because of all the, crap, all the crap, right? All the crap that I've carried around for such a long time. Now I can be me. You don't have to be afraid of being me. I don't have to be, I can tell my story without worrying about what the other person's going to think. I can be honest and authentic in my expression, and not, hide from it. And it's taken some time, but I want to be able to share that with others, because the amount of joy and sadness I can experience is so great, and yet it's real, right? It's real. It's not some kind of performance. It's like real. I'm a real person, right? I'm not just some reactionary tale. I'm a real person. So, yeah, so if you're interested in checking out some of my work, please visit me at my website, www.JuJu'beDoula.com, or follow me on Instagram. I'll post that below. And follow my channel. Check out, the videos that I will be presenting of other birth stories, of others' experiences, and really bringing awareness and bringing light to the true reality out there, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and where not only making things real so other people who have had these experiences have something to connect to and know that that was real, right? That it's the simple things like, oh, but you had a healthy baby. Oh, but that person experienced something, and validating that person's experience is very important for that person's journey, and for that person to be able to move forward. So it's allowing everything to just be, as it is, and living it, right? Like really living that journey. So looking forward to seeing you guys on my channel, and until next time, toodaloo.